Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's news update for day 327 of the war in Ukraine. You are listening to The Account. Today's news report will be a bit longer. I have two articles I want to point out, one about the tragic events in Dnipro and one about guardswoman Khrystyna Kudriava. We will also take an in-depth look at the aftermath of the destroyed apartment block in Dnipro. Otherwise, there have been quite a few minor updates, which I grouped into the usual segment of the situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. Usually we would start with the flashpoints along the front, but first the warning that has been published today. The OSCE has stated that they have no presence in the Donbas after photos of OSCE vehicles being transported to the occupied territories were shared online. The OSCE is not present in Donbas. Should you see any vehicles with OSCE markings in Donbas, know that they are not used for OSCE purposes, the tweet reads. It is suggested that Russia could use them for a false flag operation to blame Ukrainian forces for committing crimes against the OSCE. And now for the flashpoints along the front. Sevastopol. A video was shared online showing a Russian T-90M tank being destroyed by the Ukrainian army near Novoselivsk. Considering Russia deployed its most modern main battle tanks in the area, it shows the importance Russia has assigned to the settlement. Solidar. A video shared on social media shows Russian soldiers inside Silzh, marked here. This is an indicator that Solidar seems to be fully under Russian control. Ukraine most likely has taken defensive positions on the higher grounds to the west. Meanwhile, spokesperson for the eastern grouping of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Serhiy Cherevati, said Ukraine is still defending Solidar and therefore it cannot be considered captured by Russia. Russia, on the other hand, has started the production of medals for the capture of Solidar and has already decorated some soldiers with them. Bakhmut. Things have been rather quiet here today, however it is suggested Russia is forming new assault groups for renewed attacks. Klishchivka is now probably contested after some Russian channels claimed it was captured. Ukraine, however, holds the fortified higher ground to the west. And now for the articles I wanted to mention. The first is a detailed account of the tragic events of Dnipro by the Ukrainska Pravda, titled "Hatred for Russia is stronger than fear." A report from Dnipro, where Russian forces attacked an apartment block. This is a detailed account of the ongoing rescue operations after a Russian missile destroyed an apartment complex and how the community has come together in the aftermath. It includes interviews with the survivors, rescue workers and neighbors, as well as many pictures from the scene. This article includes very disturbing images. Please read it only if you can handle it. And now for the other article by the Ukrainska Pravda on Khrystyna Kudriava, titled "From the Defense of Rubizhne to the Hell near Bakhmut, the story of guardswoman Khrystyna Kudriava." The article follows Khrystyna, a senior lieutenant of the National Guard of Ukraine, and her story of the war. After defending Rubizhne in Severodonetsk, she currently is a guardswoman serving in the military unit number 3018 near Bakhmut. Her words on the war: "I see the losses we suffer, and I know the cost of the victory. I am well aware that the victory will be somber." Please give the article a read. And to start the news segment, we will take a look at the latest updates from the city of Dnipro, where a residential apartment building was destroyed in the latest Russian missile attack. The EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, wrote in a statement that Russian attacks on civilians will not go unpunished. He wrote, "Another Russian missile attack hit Ukrainian cities yesterday. Russia's inhumane aggression directly targets civilians, including children. There will be no impunity for these crimes." Poland's Prime Minister also called on the world to stop Russia now. His statement reads, "Russia intentionally keeps on committing war crimes against civilians. It's inhumane. We need to act now and make them stop." Russia, meanwhile, responded with their usual denial statements, deflecting any responsibility. The Russian armed forces do not strike residential buildings or social infrastructure. They strike military targets, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said. He also pointed to an unsubstantiated theory only circulated on social media that Ukrainian air defense caused the destruction. Please remember that there is enough evidence refuting these claims, and Russia is known for making false statements about events like these. During a meeting next Monday, the EU foreign ministers will discuss how to respond to the latest Russian escalation of the conflict. Meanwhile, the Security Service of Ukraine has named 6 Russians they say are responsible for the attack on the apartment building. If you want to check out the names, please read the article. Regarding the count of the victims of the attack on the residential building, the State Emergency Service of Ukraine stated the following. As of 1 p.m., 39 people have been rescued, including 6 children. 40 have died, including 3 children. 75 have been injured, including 14 children, and 46 are reported as missing. Rescue workers have worked tirelessly to remove over 8,000 tons of debris and 41 damaged vehicles, with 544 people involved in the operation. Moving on to the minor news updates out of Ukraine. Despite all Russian attempts to break the spirit of Ukrainians, a poll by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology shows that 95% of Ukrainians believe their country will emerge victorious, with 63% saying it will happen this year. President Zelensky held another meeting of the staff of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. The topics discussed were the situation in the Donetsk region and in the south, Russia's possible actions in the near future, and the training of junior commanders. And now a look at the occupied territories. Once again, Petro Andriuschenko, the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, is reporting about military personnel arriving in Mariupol. At least 10 trucks with soldiers from the Donetsk front arrived in the morning. According to Serhiy Haidai, head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, Russian authorities are not planning to rebuild settlements or houses destroyed in the occupied territories. Around 11:40 p.m. yesterday and 10:25 a.m. today, explosions rang out in Sevastopol in occupied Crimea. Local residents, as well as the Russian-appointed leader of the city, wrote about it. Allegedly, the explosions took place in the area of the Belbek airfield. Authorities reported UAVs were shot down. No further information is available. Moving on to the latest news from Russia and Belarus. Today, Russia and Belarus have started a joint military exercise. The exercise is focusing on airborne landing, airspace patrols along the border, aviation support for troops, reconnaissance, and support operations. Meanwhile, the spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Inat, said they are monitoring the joint exercise. He further stated that a repetition of the air assault operations in northern Ukraine during the start of the invasion is unrealistic. It would be impossible for the enemy to approach the border, let alone fly into Ukrainian airspace. Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to the president's office, claimed that at least 77% of the convicts recruited by Wagner PMC for the war in Ukraine have either been killed, captured, or wounded. He said 38,244 convicts had been recruited to fight in Ukraine, of which 29,543 are no longer capable of taking part in combat operations. Oleksiy Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, has warned that the appointment of Chief of the Russian General Staff Valery Gerasimov indicates a final push by Russia is imminent. Danilov believes that Russia is preparing for an extreme rush at the front. They used Wagner, they used Kadyrovites. Now the Russian army is coming to replace them. This gives us reason to believe that the appointment of Gerasimov is already their last call. After that, there will be no one to exchange for. Meanwhile, Andriy Yusov, a representative of the main Directorate of Intelligence, claims Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered Gerasimov to capture the entire Donbas by March 2023. And to wrap up the news segment, the latest international developments. According to General Mark Milley, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, an expanded training program for the Ukrainian military by American instructors has begun in Germany. Over the next 5 to 8 weeks, it is planned to train about 500 people on different weapon systems, joint actions, and coordination among various types of troops. Fox News reported that about 100 Ukrainian soldiers arrived in the US for training on the Patriot system. On January 15th, Ukrainian soldiers also began their training on the system in Germany. Germany has started transferring Patriot air defense systems to Poland. 3 batteries are to ensure the protection of Poland's critical infrastructure near the border with Ukraine. They will also cover a logistics point where military aid to Ukraine is collected. Canadian Defense Minister Anita Anand said that the NASAM air defense system purchased by her country will arrive in Ukraine as soon as possible, in multiple shipments if needed, and the process is not planned to take years. According to her, Canada purchased both the NASAM system and the necessary ammunition for it at the same time. Ukraine and the EU have signed a memorandum of understanding for up to €18 billion microfinancial assistance from the EU. The first payment, worth €3 billion, will be transferred to Ukraine this week and aims to cover its pressing needs. The loan period is set for 35 years, includes a 10-year grace period, and does not require Ukraine to pay any interest. It is important to note that these favorable conditions come at a price. Ukraine has to implement 20 different reforms, with each having its own deadline. They can be grouped into 4 categories: the rule of law, the energy sector, structural reforms and good governance, and macrofinancial stability. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Ambassador to Germany, Andriy Melnik, has made a proposal on Twitter for Germany to supply their old Tornado multi-role combat aircraft to Ukraine once they are decommissioned and replaced by F-35 fighters. And now for the daily intelligence updates, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. Over the weekend, intense fighting continued in both the Khrystyna and Bakhmut sectors of the Donbas front. As of January 15, 2023, Ukrainian armed forces, UAF, almost certainly maintained positions in Soledar, north of Bakhmut, in the face of continued Wagner Group assaults. Around Khrystyna, fighting has been characterized by a complex series of local attacks and counterattacks in wooded country. However, overall, the UAF continue to gradually advance their front line east of the edge of Khrystyna town. Over the last weeks, both Russia and Ukraine have achieved hard-fought but limited gains in different sectors. In these circumstances, a key operational challenge for both sides is to generate formations of uncommitted, capable troops which can exploit the tactical successes to create operational breakthroughs. And now the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the researchers, the Kremlin has likely begun preparations for decisive strategic action within the next 6 months. This would be an attempt to regain the initiative in a conflict currently dominated by a string of Ukrainian successes. Russia has so far failed to achieve any of the major goals set for its special military operation. From the failed capture of Kiev, as well as Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, to maintaining gains in Kharkiv Oblast or holding the strategic city of Kherson, Russia has failed continuously. Ukrainian forces, on the other hand, managed to liberate over 50% of the territory Russia captured since the beginning of the war. Furthermore, the air and missile campaign targeting Ukrainian critical infrastructure has so far failed to generate any significant operational effects or even demoralize Ukrainian society as the Kremlin likely intended. Despite everything, the Kremlin remains committed to their maximalistic goals, which the researchers argue will lead to further aggression in Ukraine. And wrapping up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. On January 16th, near the Ukrainian border, the joint flight and tactical training of the aviation units of the armed forces of the Republic of Belarus and Russia, which are part of the regional grouping of troops with the involvement of combat aircraft of both countries, began. Thus, under the guise of joint training, the enemy strengthened the combat aviation group in Belarus. In view of this, the threat of launching missile and airstrikes from the airspace of Belarus is increasing. On the territory of Russia, foreign citizens who are in the queue to receive citizenship of the Russian Federation are offered to voluntarily enlist in the ranks of the enemy's army and automatically receive Russian citizenship. Also, in Moscow, pressure is exerted on commercial structures in order to financially support the enemy's armed forces through the transfer of funds in the amount of 10 million rubles. At the same time, the arrival of mobilized units is expected at the Karamovsky training ground in the Rostov region for the purpose of training and further equipping units, and units of the Russian occupying forces participating in hostilities in Ukraine. First of all, additional staffing will concern the private military company Wagner and the Bars detachments, which are constantly losing personnel in Ukraine. According to available information, on January 15th, during the use of the S-300 complex by the enemy, one rocket fell on a residential building in Novopskov, Starobil district, Luhansk region. 2 civilians were killed. In the settlements of the temporarily occupied territory of Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, the Russian invaders are intensifying counterintelligence and regime measures, carrying out intensified inspections of the local population. Special attention is paid to mobile phones. And with that, we finished another one of our news updates. If you're interested in any of the articles, you can find the links in the description as usual. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.